Good evening, America. I'm Director James Morrison, and what I'm about to tell you tonight will shatter everything you thought you knew about September 11th. For 22 years, I've kept this classified, but the American people deserve the truth about the intelligence failures that could have prevented the worst attack on American soil. What happened on September 11th, 2001, wasn't just a terrorist attack. It was the culmination of systematic intelligence failures, bureaucratic negligence, and decision-making so catastrophically flawed that it cost 2,977 American lives. I was there, in the CIA Operations Center. I watched those towers fall, knowing we had pieces of information that, if properly connected, could have stopped those planes from ever taking off. Tonight, I'm going to walk you through the timeline of failures, the missed signals, the ignored warnings, the intelligence reports that sat on desks while Americans went about their morning routines, unaware that their government had failed them. 2 months before September 11th, FBI agent Kenneth Williams sent what became known as the Phoenix Memo to FBI headquarters. Williams had identified suspicious Middle Eastern men taking flight training in Arizona, not learning to land, just learning to fly. The memo specifically warned about al-Qaeda operatives infiltrating U.S. aviation universities and flight schools. It recommended a nationwide canvassing of flight schools to identify more Middle Eastern students and suggested coordinating with other agencies. That memo was buried, filed away, ignored by supervisors who deemed it not urgent enough for immediate action. Agent Williams wasn't some rookie. He was a seasoned counterterrorism specialist who knew the patterns. He saw Middle Eastern men paying cash for flight training, showing no interest in takeoffs or landings, only in controlling aircraft mid-flight. His superiors called it profiling. History calls it prescience. 3 weeks before September 11th, FBI agents in Minneapolis arrested Zacarias Moussaoui, a French citizen of Moroccan descent who had enrolled in flight training and raised immediate red flags. Moussaoui paid $6,800 in cash to learn to fly Boeing 747s. When instructors asked why he wanted to learn to fly commercial jets, he said he was just curious. He showed no interest in learning to take off or land, only in steering large aircraft. The Minneapolis FBI immediately suspected terrorism connections. They applied for a FISA warrant to search Moussaoui's computer and belongings. That warrant was denied by FBI headquarters. FBI agent Colleen Rowley later testified that FBI headquarters seemed almost deliberately sabotaging the Minneapolis investigation. Supervisors in Washington blocked nearly every investigative step the field agents wanted to take. Had that warrant been approved, investigators would have found evidence directly linking Moussaoui to the 9/11 plot, including contact information for other hijackers and details about their plans. Instead, Moussaoui sat in a Minneapolis jail cell while his co-conspirators boarded American Airlines Flight 11 and United Airlines Flight 175. Here's what keeps me awake at night, America. On September 10th, 2001, less than 24 hours before the attacks, the National Security Agency intercepted 2 phone calls from Afghanistan to the United States. The first call contained the phrase, "Tomorrow is 0 hour." The second call said, "The match begins tomorrow." The NSA had the technology to intercept these calls in real time. They had the capability to trace the recipients. They had protocols for immediate alerts when certain keywords were detected. But those intercepts weren't translated from Arabic until September 12th, 1 day too late. Why? Because the NSA was so compartmentalized that even urgent intercepts followed routine processing procedures. The translators worked normal business hours. There was no emergency protocol for time-sensitive intelligence. Those calls were warnings, clear, unambiguous warnings that something was happening the next day. And they sat in a queue while Americans slept their last peaceful night. Mohamed Atta, the lead hijacker, was identified by a classified U.S. military intelligence program called Able Danger more than a year before 9/11. Able Danger used data mining techniques to identify potential al-Qaeda operatives. They created a chart with photographs of suspected terrorists. Mohamed Atta's photograph was on that chart. Lieutenant Colonel Anthony Schaffer, an Army intelligence officer, later testified that Able Danger identified Atta as a threat and recommended sharing this information with the FBI. That recommendation was blocked by military lawyers who claimed sharing the intelligence would violate privacy laws protecting U.S. persons. Mohamed Atta wasn't a U.S. person. He was a foreign national on a temporary visa who had been flagged as a potential terrorist. But bureaucratic concerns about privacy laws prevented intelligence agencies from stopping the future pilot of American Airlines Flight 11. The same legal concerns that were supposed to protect Americans ended up killing Americans. Here's the failure that haunts me most, because I lived it firsthand. In January 2000, the CIA identified two al-Qaeda operatives, Khalid al-Mihdhar and Nawaf al-Hazmi, at a terrorist summit in Malaysia. We knew they were planning something against American targets. We followed them. We photographed them. We tracked their movements. And then, we lost them. What we didn't do was tell the FBI that these two known terrorists had entered the United States. The CIA tracked them to Los Angeles, then lost surveillance. For legal reasons, the CIA couldn't conduct domestic operations to find them. But instead of immediately notifying the FBI, who could legally track them inside the U.S., the CIA held onto the intelligence for 20 months. 20 months, America. Al-Mihdhar and al-Hazmi lived openly in California. They used their real names. They took flight lessons. Al-Mihdhar even left the country and came back using the same passport that the CIA knew was connected to terrorism. The FBI wasn't notified about these two men until August 23, 2001. By then, it was too late to find them before they boarded American Airlines Flight 77 and flew it into the Pentagon. French intelligence warned us. German intelligence warned us. Israeli intelligence warned us. Even Russian intelligence warned us. The French told us that al-Qaeda was planning aircraft hijackings. The Germans identified specific flight schools where terrorists were training. The Israelis provided names of suspected operatives in the United States. These weren't vague threats about potential future attacks. These were specific, actionable intelligence reports identifying the method, the targets, and even some of the perpetrators. The warnings were so specific that some foreign intelligence agencies later said they couldn't understand why the United States didn't act on the information they provided. We had intelligence from allies. We had our own domestic intelligence. We had intercepts, surveillance, and identified suspects. What we didn't have was a system that could connect the dots fast enough to save lives. The real tragedy of 9/11 isn't that we lacked intelligence. It's that we had too much intelligence spread across too many agencies that couldn't or wouldn't talk to each other. The CIA knew about the Malaysia summit, but didn't tell the FBI about the terrorists entering America. The FBI knew about suspicious flight training, but didn't connect it to CIA intelligence about planned hijackings. The NSA intercepted the final warning calls, but didn't translate them in time. The military identified Mohamed Atta, but legal concerns prevented sharing that intelligence. Each agency was protecting its own turf, its own sources, its own methods. While they played bureaucratic games, Mohamed Atta was learning to fly Boeing 767s in Florida. On August 6, 2001, President Bush received a presidential daily brief titled, "Bin Laden Determined to Strike in U.S." That brief specifically mentioned FBI information indicating patterns of suspicious activity in the United States, consistent with preparations for hijackings or other types of attacks. It mentioned that al-Qaeda members had resided in or traveled to the United States for years, and the group apparently maintained a support structure that could aid attacks. The sitting president of the United States was told in writing that Osama bin Laden was determined to attack America and that the FBI had information about suspicious activities consistent with hijacking preparations. This wasn't a vague warning about future possibilities. This was current intelligence about active preparations for attacks inside the United States. Yet, no extraordinary measures were taken. No agencies were put on highest alert. No special task forces were created to urgently investigate the suspicious activities the FBI had identified. Behind every intelligence failure I've described tonight were real people making real decisions that cost real lives. The businessman who worked on the 95th floor of the North Tower and never made it home to his family because an NSA intercept wasn't translated fast enough. The flight attendant on American Airlines Flight 77 who died because the CIA didn't tell the FBI about known terrorists in Los Angeles. The firefighter who climbed the stairs of the South Tower because bureaucratic walls prevented agencies from sharing life-saving intelligence. 3,000 Americans died, not because we lacked the intelligence to stop 9/11, but because the intelligence we had was trapped in a system more concerned with protecting agency prerogatives than protecting American lives. What happened after September 11th was almost as shameful as what happened before. Instead of accountability, we got deflection. Instead of admissions of failure, we got excuses about connecting the dots being impossible. Officials who ignored warnings received promotions. Agents who tried to raise alarms were transferred or marginalized. The system that failed so catastrophically was largely left intact. The 9/11 Commission did valuable work, but they were limited in what they could investigate and what they could reveal. Much of what I'm telling you tonight was classified away from their inquiry. The American people were told they were getting the full truth. They weren't. They were getting a sanitized version designed to protect institutions rather than honor victims. 22 years later, I'm breaking my silence because I can no longer live with the weight of what I know. The men and women who died on September 11th deserved better from their government. Their families deserved the truth about why their loved ones died preventable deaths. America, your intelligence agencies had the information to stop 9/11. We had names, we had faces, we had warnings, we had time. What we didn't have was a system capable of acting on the intelligence we possessed. What we didn't have was leadership willing to break down bureaucratic walls to save American lives. The greatest intelligence failure in American history wasn't a failure of intelligence gathering. It was a failure of intelligence sharing, intelligence analysis, and intelligence action. And until we're honest about those failures, until we're honest about the systematic negligence that cost 2,977 lives, we remain vulnerable to making the same deadly mistakes again. The truth doesn't dishonor the memory of those who died on September 11th. The truth honors them by demanding better from the institutions that failed them. This is Director James Morrison, and America deserves nothing less than the full truth.